To the U.S., where Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris took to the stage at a campaign stop in Maryland with U.S. President Joe Biden for the first time since the president dramatically dropped out of that race. Journalist Nick Harper has been watching and has all the details. Nick, what did we see from the duo?
Yeah, Abby, fascinating optics during the course of this event. Obviously, as Vice President, Kamala Harris would normally very much play second fiddle to the president. She would not be hogging the limelight. But today, during the event, it was very clear that the spotlight was on her. She would normally make rather quick remarks before handing it over to the president, who would take on the majority of the speech. During today's event, she spoke for about 10 minutes, a much more substantial amount of time than would normally happen. She then handed over to President Biden, who spoke for about 20 minutes. And in introducing him, she had many warm words for him. She said, "I could speak all afternoon about the person I'm on stage with." She called him an extraordinary president. And when the crowd started to chant, "Thank you, Joe," she said, "There's a lot of love in this room for our president." Very much a case that she was there to champion him, but he was also there to make it clear that he is passing the baton to her. And when he first began to speak, after she had handed over to him, he had some very warm words for her as well. Let's listen in.
Folks, I have an incredible partner. The progress we've made, she's going to make one hell of a president.
So it was very interesting. This was, of course, a government announcement as part of the Biden administration, but also used really as a campaign appearance. Joe Biden putting a heavy emphasis on Kamala Harris. Interesting to note all of this happening just before Harris gives her first policy speech on Friday. She says that she's going to talk about the economy and how she plans to lower costs for Americans. There is some speculation that even though they appeared together on stage during the course of this afternoon, on Friday she intends to come up with policies and ideas that would be a break from the Biden administration in some of the ways that she intends to move the economy forward.
Nick, we're also learning that VP picks Tim Walz and J.D. Vance are set to debate now on October 1st. What more are you hearing about that?
That's right, Abby. After months and months of back and forth, an unknown quantity of who was going to be the vice president, and then a change at the top of the ticket for the Democrats, we know that the vice presidential picks will be meeting on October the 1st. The Democratic vice presidential nominee, Tim Walz, confirmed that yesterday. And earlier today, we had confirmation from J.D. Vance, the Republican, that he would be appearing to debate against Tim Walz on October the 1st. But he also said that he was suggesting a second date when he could potentially debate with Walz on September the 18th. So far, there's been no confirmation from the Walz campaign that they intend to do that. As for Harris and Trump, they'll be meeting for their first debate on September the 10th. Trump, of course, suggested two other dates in September. What we've also learned today is the Harris campaign seems to be suggesting that Harris would be up for a second debate with Trump at some point in October. They said that the American people will have another opportunity to see the vice president and Donald Trump on the debate stage in October. No word yet, though, on when that date exactly might be.
Journalist Nick Harper. Thank you so much, Nick. We're going to stay with this story, and to get more insights on it, we're going to be joined now by Chris Galdieri. He's a professor of political science at St. Anselm College, and he's joining us now from Concord, New Hampshire. Chris, thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon. I want to start by asking you, what's the strategy here in having President Joe Biden on that stage with Kamala Harris for the first time? What is the plan?
Well, I think the Harris campaign is probably going to use President Biden pretty sparingly throughout this election. And when they do, it will be in events like this, events where they can tout a big policy development, in this case, negotiated drug prices for people on Medicare, and in deep blue areas. I think it's noteworthy that this event took place in Maryland, a safely Democratic state, and not, say, a more swing state where the president is particularly unpopular.
What kind of role could he then play? You said they are going to use him sparingly, but it's an odd situation, right, to have an outgoing president. He's not running again. She is. She certainly wants to tie herself to any of his policies that are getting a high approval rating, particularly from the Democratic base. So how could this look like in the coming weeks?
Well, I think you'll see, these sorts of joint appearances. You will see, I think the first night of the Democratic Convention is going to feature the president in a prominent speaking role. But I think, based on Joe Biden's record, based on the fact that his decision to step aside this year was really based on his fears that it would hurt the Democratic Party, I think he is more likely than not going to place himself at the Harris campaign's disposal. In other words, if they think it will help him to go to, say, his hometown of Scranton, he'll go to his hometown of Scranton. But if they say, Mr. President, don't do that, go out here to California, maybe you can help us in some House races, that sort of thing, that's what he'll do. I think he is, coming to terms with his current role in the Democratic Party, which is essentially to be a cheerleader for Vice President Harris and try to get her over the finish line on election night.
We've been hearing reports of strained relationship between Nancy Pelosi, for example, and Joe Biden and the work that she did to sort of push him out. Could those types of strained relationships have any kind of impact on the Democratic ticket?
My guess is that they probably won't. I think, those bad feelings are largely limited to President Biden and his inner circle of advisors. So I think, there's not much likelihood that these sorts of things are going to spill over into the rest of the campaign. And I think from Vice President Harris's perspective, if she does win the election, she will want to have Nancy Pelosi in her corner when it comes to getting legislation passed, rather than continuing, a feud between herself and the president.
Let's talk a little bit about this VP debate that's now scheduled for October 1st. VPs on the ticket can't necessarily make the ticket, but they can break it. So what are you anticipating when you see Tim Walz go up against J.D. Vance come October 1st?
Well, I think this will be like, the really first opportunity for Americans to see these two candidates on a stage together. And I think, you'll have conflict between the two of them over, their different visions for the country. J.D. Vance came to prominence as a result of his autobiography about his Appalachian upbringing and that sort of thing. And Tim Walz, I think, represents a different argument about what the country should be like, what, the future could be. And so I think, between the two of them, you'll have J.D. Vance offering his very particular version of conservatism versus Tim Walz, who has run a fairly, leftish populist administration in Minneapolis. So I think you'll see a lot of conflict over issues like abortion, over the two candidates' military service, and over the proper role of government in Americans' lives.
Chris, we're hearing reports that senior Republicans as well as strategists are essentially begging Donald Trump to stay on message, to focus on policy issues that impact the American people, that the American people care about. But just as we saw yesterday and in recent campaign events, he's very much talking about crowd sizes. He's attacking Kamala Harris personally, talking about her ethnicity and her race. What kind of messaging is that doing? Like, what is the impact that's having on the electorate? Are they sort of tuning him out, or is this working for him?
No, I think it is hurting his campaign at this point. I think one of the big dangers that Trump faces is that he has been around for a very long time as American politics goes. He's running for president for the third consecutive cycle. No one has done that since Franklin Roosevelt. And it took a Great Depression and World War II to make it even possible for him to do that. Trump really seems to be, rehashing his old grievances, talking about his term in office in nostalgic terms, complaining about the 2020 election, and now he's complaining about the switch from Biden to Harris in 2024. Trump has always been a candidate who does not have a ton of message discipline. And I think this year it is really getting worse. And I think it's really only going to hurt him. He simply is in, season 9 or 10 of the Donald Trump show. And I think at that point, a lot of viewers are ready for something different.
There's been quite a bit of momentum since Kamala Harris rose to the top of the ticket. A lot of that we see on social media. But if Donald Trump gets to the point where he's able to focus on the issues that Americans care about, the economy, the border, providing specifics on the policies that he plans to implement if he gets into the White House, could that blunt some of Harris's momentum?
It's possible that he could, if he could remind voters of why they supported him in previous elections and that sort of thing. But all the evidence so far this year indicates that that is not something Trump is either interested in doing or capable of doing. Yesterday he was in North Carolina giving what was billed as a speech on the economy, and like every Trump appearance this year, he went off on wild tangents about Kamala Harris, about her background, about everything other than the economy. And I think, he does have a certain core of supporters who enjoy this and don't mind it. But in terms of converting the voters that he needs to get across the finish line, I think these sorts of things are only damaging his cause.
Thank you so much for this, Chris. Chris Galdieri is a professor of politics at St. Anselm College. Thank you.
Thank you, Abby.